for coming, Jordan Levy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, go ahead.
We were just discussing this. I asked you this before.
Yeah.
Metro Toronto is nearly 6 million people now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's the same size as roughly the state of Israel.
Right.
The state of Israel is the third most prominent venture-invested country on earth. Something to the tune of $7.5 billion this year will be invested in startups in Israel. Every major venture firm in North America and most of the European funds have offices there. Toronto is a city with tremendous intellectual capital, phenomenal diversity, very large immigrant community of very smart people that have come to find fame and fortune, I guess. Yet, it's a disaster when it comes to startup VC investment. It doesn't exist. There's, I guess we could count as many VCs in Buffalo, which is obviously dormant, and a fraction of the size, yet I don't get it. So I would love you guys to tell me what happened.
I would argue that because of all of the natural resources here in Canada, you tend to have a lot of investment in that, whereas since Israel doesn't have the extent of the resources that we do, and that's not such a big part of its GDP, that investment perhaps needs to go into things that produce disproportionate returns on investment, like technology. So I think that a lot of the cash and capital has been made off the natural resources here, whether it's oil, gas, lumber, and that's kind of skewed the expertise of the people with capital towards extraction of natural resources. Whereas in some places that might not be as much the case.
You really want to debate that with me? I don't think so. I mean, yes, there's a lot of money that's been made and a lot of investment in natural resources throughout this vast, beautiful country, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a world financial center, which has migrated from Montreal to Toronto now, and this is a major world financial center. That hasn't had an impact. It doesn't change the fact that there's all these people starting these businesses, graduating from great schools. We're going to Waterloo from here, and I can tell you from the U.S. point of view, Waterloo is looked at very much like University of Chicago and Columbia and Caltech and MIT. It's at the same level in terms of the way U.S. companies look at the recruiting from talent there. And then you have all the other stuff. So, that doesn't make sense. But we're going to keep going.
And two counterpoints, by the way. If you want to look for cowboys and risk takers, you go to mining and oil and gas, and they're not making $2 to $10 million bets. They're making $100 million bets. So there's lots of appetite for risk in this country.
But where's that?
It also doesn't change the fact that what I said is every major U.S. venture fund has a facility, an office, and a team in Israel.
That was because of Yasma.
No, that was because that's because when if you remember the old comment when Willie Sutton asked him why he robbed banks, because that's where the money was. We're there because that's where the opportunities are. And I don't know how that's not happening here the same way. That's what's perplexing to me.
We're regulated to the teeth, okay? CRTC is right now fighting Netflix. Netflix for what? Delivering TV through the internet. They want to regulate Netflix, and they fight everything. Every regulated body fights whatever innovation takes place outside of the regulated bodies. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So, banking, telecommunications, what else we got? I'm sure we can come up with more. Those are just a couple of things. What was it? I'm sure there's more, but we are regulated to the teeth, and somebody out there just stops things that just doesn't make any sense when it comes to innovation.
So those major stakeholders in the private sector, the alleged private sector of Toronto, it's not like New York.
No, BlackBerry, and we can debate BlackBerry. BlackBerry was the dominant provider of smartphones in the world. They were located in Canada. Nortel at one time dominated switches for telephones. Corel in its day, and I dealt with Michael Copeland, and they had a phenomenal, there's been no shortage of companies coming out of here, so regulation didn't stop them. And I can tell you right now, there's a bunch of companies that I saw today that should be funded. Why aren't the VCs here?
What I'm saying is, we're good starters, we're not good enders.
Oh, you're not finishers, okay.
No, it's
So
not.
here's,
No,
here's
and I know.
another perspective. So
Go
here's
ahead.
another perspective.
Name, rank.
Jeff Folds, I've got a startup called Affinity. We're working on a platform for being able to do product configurators for everything from medical devices to aircraft parts. In my experience in the Canadian tech business goes back 20 years as a principal of a startup, as a business development guy for companies that actually manage to survive the meat grinder, which is trying to get off the ground in Canada. And I can tell you that it is, the problem we have here is that we almost have too good a university system, because it's spitting out fabulous ideas and fabulous people at a rate that you just can't comprehend. And if you're going to make those kinds of things work, everybody's focused on the technical risk. Technical risk is actually the easy part. The hard part is the executional risk to scale that business. And we're really good, if you look at IRAP and SHRED, at funding mechanisms to get ideas out of the lab and getting them started. And there's this black hole that you hit when you get past that to actually scale the business. And far, far too many businesses are forced to either sell out way too early. That's why you've got GE set up in the north end of town, just scooping up all these great businesses at a really discounted
But
price.
Hootsuite did, and they stayed independent. They just closed a
Yeah,
$50
well,
million
sure.
round. I think they announced
You
it
can-
yesterday, right?
You
That's
can pick an
that's
exception.
Homer's money.
You can pick an exception to every rule, but I'm telling you in terms of the volume and the quantity of what I've seen, this is what tends to happen. You look at the TSX, they have this lovely slide deck that shows all the financing activity in the TSX. And they have a massive pile of, I don't know how many billions I've forgotten, that goes into oil and gas and mineral exploration all over the planet. It is the #1 financial market on the planet if you want to do oil and gas and mining exploration financing. Then they have this other little slice of the pie that's about this big.
It's 3%. And if it
And that's their entire
technology.
technology investment, and that's
But
IT, that's medical devices, that's biotech, it's pharma, it's everything. And you cannot get off the ground unless you've got some sort of depth to go with all that.
But if you
And that's the problem.
and when BlackBerry and Nortel were both kicking, it was 33% of the TSS.
The other thing I think that and I asked a question, is the angel community, and there's a lot of wealth in Toronto, obviously. I'm talking about Toronto, let's not even discuss, the western states, let's just focus on Toronto. There's huge wealth here. I watch the city, I'm among the older people in the room, and I've been coming here since I was a little kid. And we came alive. I worked for a Canadian company one time. I worked for an ad agency that was headquartered on Prince Arthur, and I came here, once or twice a week. I owned a company here. We started Ingram Micro Canada. Here we bought a company called Aviva Software. So I was up here, right? So I've been coming here my whole life. I used to come and shop. I bought all my clothes at Harry Rosen when the dollar was 60 cents. Was the greatest thing in the world. Right? But seriously, this was where I came for my entertainment and so I've watched this grow. There's huge wealth here. Why aren't the angels as active as they are in so many other places? I'm just confused by it, to be honest with you. We don't have to spend the whole evening talking about it. Something you guys should ponder as a community, and it's something that you guys have to fix, because it won't change unless somebody starts to fix it. And I think that the wealthy angels, somebody has to take the lead and say, I'm going to start doing these things. I'm going to start being an angel network. And we're going to start funding and taking risk. And, I think a lot of people got scared. I watched it in 2001 when the bubble burst, right? And everybody thought up until then they were all making so much money, put $10,000 in a deal that's worth $1 million in a year, right? And, this is like the lottery. Now that doesn't exist. And so they all went away and they went back to investing in real estate, and they went back to investing in oil and gas and mining companies and whatever it is that, everybody, mostly real estate. I guess everybody wants to be in real estate in Toronto. So you got to fix that. The angel community has to step up and take a lead. And that's really what has done a lot. I mean, people don't realize the success of Silicon Valley. A lot of it has to do with, really the impetus was Hewlett Packard. No matter what anybody wants to say, it was Hewlett Packard. It wasn't anything else. And then it was this network of guys, they were all guys, that left Hewlett Packard because they made a lot of money, and they started to become angels. And they used to have office hours. And they would sit there, and they would start writing checks in those days for $5,000 and $10,000 and $20,000. And that's what really started venture investing in Silicon Valley. And that created funds because they started doing it. And these guys are among the wealthiest people on earth today. And we really need that. And we're working hard at that in Buffalo, to get the angels. And it's frustrating to me because my friends who have money, they all wanted to do it when it was this great, unbelievable surge from 1995 to 2001. But now it's like, they don't want to do it anymore. And I try to convince them it's their social responsibility. I also tell the young entrepreneurs who have been successful, you guys had mentoring, you had us, we helped you. Now you guys got to take $200,000. You just sold your business for $220 million. One case, Ashok Subramanian, liaison. Just take $200,000. You're going to put 25 in 8 deals, and then go get a few of the other guys there to do the same. And then these guys that had Campus Labs and other exits sold $60 million, and each of the founders got $20 million. I said, so $200,000. To do what we did for you. And you got to do that, and then you got to go get some of your friends. And if they're only $10,000 check writers, they got to come to the table, and that's what it takes to get it going. But you guys have a bigger issue because you have all these companies. You've got to find a way to get these U.S. VCs to show up here, because I haven't been here before, and I live in Buffalo on the weekends. I mean, you guys, those of you that go up to Muskoka on the weekend or whatever, or go to, Crystal Beach, and the New Yorkers that go to the Hamptons. I go from New York. I work in New York. I go to Buffalo on my weekends. That's my Hamptons, right? That's because that's where I'm from. So I drove up here. I haven't been here in years to meet with the tech community or see a deal. John got me here probably 8 years ago. I looked at a couple of companies.
John.
All right. Before when it was
JLA.
JLA. And I came and looked at a couple of deals, but I didn't do them. But I haven't been here in years, and I live in Buffalo. It's pretty easy, right? And I won't come. So what happens? Fred Wilson comes to my house. I hope you know who Fred Wilson is. So Fred's been to Buffalo a lot because he's one of my closest friends. And so he came one day, calls me up. He says, I got to go to Waterloo for a kick board meeting.
Right.
And so he said, why don't I come up to Buffalo and I want to see how, can I get an update on what's going on with all the startups and the tech stuff and all the stuff you did in your incubator and all this stuff. Came up and spent a day and a half, and then he drove up to Toronto. But it takes that. We got to help you guys do that. So let's go to, what do you want to talk about besides that? That was what I wanted to talk about. Questions?
Comment I've heard from VCs, not at the $20 million stage, but at the million to 3 million, 4 million, that investing outside the country is too risky, that there's too many legislative hurdles. Are you familiar with any of those hurdles? And how we can alleviate them?
We'll have a frank talk, and I guess I'll be recorded so I can get myself in trouble. Because VCs, have a tendency to have a lot of excuses, because what they really want to do is they want to make a reservation, but they don't want to use it. So they want to make sure that they have a placeholder in case you're successful. So they'll tell you things like they got regulation. They'll tell you things like it's the wrong stage. They'll tell you things like they're just too busy right now, and it's all unobliterated bullshit. Because when they like a deal, let me tell you something, it's like locusts. We just did a deal, and this is just unusual for us, but we found a deal that we knew was competitive. We went from 6 days from first meeting to a $7 million independent term sheet where we're funding 100% of it, and I think it was 5 or 6 days. That tells you how much due diligence we did. And we competed with 6 other venture funds, all of whom you know the names of, for the deal. And everybody was that fast. when it's a great deal, you're jumping in. So there's no regulation. It's just irrelevant. So I got to deal with a cap table issue, and I got to deal with whether you're C Corp or S Corps and the U.S. LLCs, whatever the structure is, doesn't really make a big difference. There's the fact of the matter is you can get around that. You can say, well, you set up a U.S. corporation, and we'll invest in that, and that corporation, that'll be a wholly owned sub of the Canadian. It's nothing. And you do have some regulations here that have effect. I remember when we were in the book business, and we couldn't be in the book business in Canada. That's regulated, I think, by Jerry Schwartz. So his wife could be, and she could have the business, right? And but seriously, there are some things that block, obviously, but not technology investments. There's no issues.
Yeah.
You just figure out there's a structure. That's what lawyers are for, and they do that. And that's why they get paid a bunch of dough. No issue at all. Just an excuse they don't want to invest in.
And there used to be,
and they want to be nice.
Yeah. There used to be some tax implications, but Section 116 was changed about 2 years ago, and so you don't even really need to incorporate the United States.
Understand something. What's going to happen is eventually, with a few exceptions, you're going to become a U.S. company. Anyways, because this is 10% of North American market at best, right? Maybe really it's only as much as 6. So you're going to come to the States. That's what we all want you to do, and that's how the investment vehicle will be there. It's not a big issue. It's not a hurdle. It's just an excuse.
I'm Johan Larson. I'm a developer. So you have a lot of people asking you for money. There must be some claims.
You talk to my kids too?
So there must be some things that people keep telling you over and over again that you never want to hear again.
Well, it's not. I don't know that it's that clear. Let me give you some insight into how I see the business a little bit from, like I was saying, Michael, what happens when we're in the room. I always have this thing. There's always 2 conversations: one when you're in the room, and one when you're not. Well, here's the conversation when you're not in the room. Ultimately, the first thing is it's all about you guys. I believe that most every one of you is going to call at least 1, if not 2 or 3 audibles. You guys might use the word pivoting, but since I try to be different, I call it audible since I'm a football guy. The quarterback sees the play, and all of a sudden he sees they're blitzing, and yet he was going to run. He was going to throw the pass. He better get a bomb, and they needed to have the guy get out there far, so he better change the play, or he's probably not going to get the play off. So you're going to call one anyways. But the question is, are you capable of calling those audibles? Are you capable of recognizing that? And the biggest piece of the conversation is always about the team. That's we'll spend the majority of our time on. And when I talk to my friends, the other guys that I do deals with, it's that, one example, I had a guy that passed on Uber. They have a no asshole policy at their fund. And the CEO of Uber, in their opinion, I would never say that, they felt was not a guy they wanted to invest in. And so they passed. But ultimately, everything starts with, do we like these folks? Can she get us to the promised land? Can they build this company the way they think? Do they have the domain expertise? They want to build a cure for cancer, and the guy went to community college and was a football player. And, because his mother had cancer, he's going to invent a cure. That's a tough sell, right? I'm being really off the chart here. But seriously, that biggest piece is all about, we debate that extensively. Then we talk about the business. And what we really talk about, rarely is it IP. Rarely is it the IP. Sometimes it will be. But that's a short piece of conversation. Really is, how big can the company be? How big is the opportunity, the marketplace? Can they get there? What's it going to take? Do they have the chops? Do they have the stuff? And those are really what goes on. That's the conversation. And if you do, like I said, if you got the young guys that do the due diligence, they will basically find a reason not to do a deal. It's easy to find a zillion reasons not to do a deal. There's no perfect deal. Believe me, there's no perfect deal. My biggest investment, the success of all time, would be, I guess, E-Trade. And it was not a perfect deal when I met him. And it turned out to be a great outcome, obviously. But it was not a perfect deal by any scope. It was pretty good. But you want to know something? The CEO, Christos Kotsakos, who I haven't seen in many years, Came from FedEx. He was like the number 2 guy at FedEx. Before that, he would have been running one of the big research companies. Just a great CEO. The guy was killer. And he got it. And he said to me, the reason we met is he wanted me, we had a call center, but we did outsource call centers all over North America. And tech support, customer service. And he wanted me to be his front end because he didn't want the infrastructure. Well, that's pretty smart. Why would you have the fixed infrastructure? You can outsource it. Eventually you'll do it when you get big enough, right? So, I mean, all those things. But I didn't. There was a bunch of stuff like, really? You're going to trades for $8? You know, Merrill Lynch and, you know, Goldman Sachs and all those guys charged, what, percentages in those days? And how do you make money? Well, they
E-Trade.
E-Trade.
Right.
I didn't get it, right? But I loved him. I thought he was this, and turned out we cashed $1.8 billion for the $11 million investment.
Good day.
We cashed $1.8 billion. We still had, you know, that was pretty good. Yeah, we invested $11 million.
That's a good day.
It was,
Job.
huh?
Wrong job.
Well, but I'm only telling you about the winner. You got to understand, this is a very difficult business. I was telling these guys a story. I think we were just, I think it was, so this is the bad part about this business. So I have a company. It's really a terrific business. It's a 3rd or 4th time CEO. He's 40 years old. And he's had successful exits each time, but never huge ones. You know, 20s, 30s, 40s, but never a lot of invested capital, so it was always a good outcome. But nothing great, but always good. And the companies went on and they did successful later on. So I did this deal with 2 other very, 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 very prominent venture funds. And we put money in, and I think we've got about $14 million of paid-in capital that we put in this company so far. And the CEO wants to sell the business. And we have an offer for just under $70 million. Not bad, right? I guess it's okay. We don't want to do it because we think there's a gigantic opportunity. We honestly believe we have a $100+ million revenue company in the next 30 months. We're growing like that, and that is, you know, if you look at the multiples, the average SaaS company sells for 9.2 times revenue. If you're growing at a certain rate, you get as high as 15 or 16 times revenue. And if you're growing at 20%, maybe you're going to get, you know, 5 to 7 times revenue for any of the SaaS business. That's sort of the model. But 9.2 times is the average. When you get to $100 million in revenue, we can sell this business for $1 billion. Why are we selling? We'll put in, we gave a term sheet to put $15 million in at a 70 pre. He wants to sell. Why does he want to sell? $67 million. He's going to get 15. The COO, his co-founder, is going to get 7.5. The truth is, that's life-changing, right? $15 million. He's not poor now. He's had a couple of exits and made handful of millions, several handfuls of millions each time. But this is pretty, you know, like, why not? Stuff could go wrong, you know, and that's so we have. No one wants to sell this business, and it has been a contentious, horrible experience. It's been a battle and a war for the last 2 weeks.
And that's, but if he had a bigger stake in the company right now, would he want to sell?
He's got a big stake. He's got a very big stake in the company. He wants to sell because it's a bird in the hand, and he's afraid what could happen next. That's not the guy that I would invest in. So I looked at him and I said, I just want to let you know, I'll support the deal. I don't really want to do it, but I will never do business with you again. I want you to understand that. And there is another fund that he did his last deal with, and they won't speak. They don't speak. They would never do a deal with him again. And none of the 3 of us, so he's now got 4 funds, will never touch him again. Now he's got plenty of money, but he wants to do another startup. He's already got an idea. I said, why don't you just, we'll hire a CEO and go do your startup, and you could be the chairman and keep your equity, and maybe we'll even do a secondary. We'll give you some equity. It's been ugly, screaming, yelling, you know, threats, you name it. It's the ugly part of the business. We don't want to sell. I mean, our problem is we're leaving your company. We don't really want to take care of it. We're offering them a valuation above what the company's even being sold for. Very ugly situation, the bad part of the business. It happens. But it gets ugly. When things go bad is when it really is ugly. That's the worst time. When companies go bad, it's not good. Because what you have to understand with the venture capitalist, sometimes known as vulture capitalists, you have to understand that, like Coca-Cola sells soda pop, right? These guys sell developers and programmers that do work for people. You guys are building products. That's your commodity. My commodity is capital. But that's how I make a living. People say, well, it's not your money. Of course it's my money. This is how I make a living. I happen to forget that I'm an LP in my fund. That's even irrelevant. This is what I do for a living. My commodity is capital. It's a precious commodity. This is what I trade in, and I treat it like it is my own. And so it's very difficult when people they're not performing, and you have to make decisions, and it gets ugly. And the one thing that I need to tell you all is never forget this. No matter what you think the cap table looks like when you take in venture from institutional investors, VCs, I don't care what provisions you put into the documents. Talk about how you control it, you only get one board seat out of 5, all those things that you think about. I control your business, regardless of what any of the terms say, as soon as I'm investing. The reason I control your business, even if we only own 10 or 15 or 20%, and it's not because I want to, it's the reality. I do that because I generally will have some blocking rights, but more importantly, the block I have is psychological. What other VC is going to come into a company if the current VC says this is one of the most horrible people and this is one of the worst companies I've ever invested in? So once you have, and then every other VC says, why is SoftBank not participating? Well, you'll have to ask them. Well, they'll give you an answer, but I have to call them and ask them. And when we're not participating in one of our companies, I would say that in the venture business, I don't know what the data is, but I would guess that less than 5% of companies get funded when the current investors don't follow on and continue to support the company. It's hard for new VCs to come in because there's something behind those onions, as you peel it back, that there must be there that they don't know about. Sometimes, but it's very rare. So as soon as you take the money, understand you have a boss.
So you've invested in this guy, you said, multiple times.
No, I haven't. I didn't invest him in the past. I know other guys did.
So what's he scared
Well, markets change, right? I mean, markets do change. We had a company, Thumbplay. I don't know if anybody remembers Thumbplay. But Thumbplay was a company that we went from 0 to over $100 million in revenue in less than 2 years. We were selling ringtones and subscription model on deck with mobile phone carriers. And we had about 11 million people paying us $10 a month on a subscription model. And then you got all the ringtones you wanted, all you could eat, and people loved it, right? And the average churn, by the way, was 8 months. They lasted 8 months and they fell off. And of course, we always thought we'd get one more month because it was all about our CAC, right? It was all about lifetime value, customer acquisition cost. And so if we could keep them 1 month longer, that was like all margin, right? I mean, that was just, so we spent a lot of time doing that. Well, what happened to the ringtones? Disappeared one day. Now we'd raised money. We were up to 120 million in revenue. Killing it. We had raised money at a $300 million valuation. We took in $30 million. We were spending money like drunken sailors to build customers because we would just keep growing customers, right? And then figure out how to retain them. News Corp offered us $165 million for the business. We invested, by the way, at a $5 million valuation because we were the first investor. We couldn't take it because we'd raised all this money at this high valuation. So we overvalued the company, and ultimately the company, this again, the CEO, the company basically pretty much went out of business, and we sold it for $30 million. We waited too long because the market changed. Who needed ringtones anymore? You can get them for free, or you paid from iTunes about $25 or about $29, whatever they cost, and we just gone, evaporated. On the other hand, there's the other side of the story, OMG Pop. True story. That deal that I told you about with the due diligence, the guy did come in eventually. We fund the company. We go forward. It's a dog. Dan Porter will be upset when he sees this. But it was a dog. we were doing 4.5 million in annual revenue, 400,000 a month, something like that. We had, 60, 70 people. We were burning cash, and we get to a board meeting, and we're in January. We were out of capital in April. I said to the board, "Okay, guys, we're going to be out of money. Is anybody going to be prepared to write a check?" Ding, zero, ding, 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 ding. So we got to hire a banker to sell the company. Okay, you do it, Jordan. I said, okay, who should we? Anybody have any? Okay, so we called all the bankers. Nobody would take us. We got turned down by every banker. And this is like Spark, Bessemer, Rowe, you know who that guy was, SoftBank, right? And we couldn't get anybody with our relationships and juice to say they'd take a deal. Why? They didn't think they could sell it, and if they did, it was going to be an acqui-hire. $3 to $5 million, not very little the cap table, and they want a minimum fee of $1 million too. That's the minimum fee that bankers were wanting. They don't see how they can get paid, and they don't think they can succeed, and they didn't want to disappoint any of us. Shit, what am I going to do? I mean, we're toast, right? We're losing money. So I finally go to another banker. I actually called my friend of mine, who's head of corp dev at Yahoo. I said, "Who's good in games that I don't know?" He says, "Oh, this guy, Brian Stengel at Waller Capital. He did a couple of deals. I remember. He was pretty good. Never heard of him. Go to Brian, have him meet the company." He says, "Yeah, I do this." He says, "But my minimum." I said, "No, your minimum fee's bullshit." I said, "You've never done a deal with Spark. You've never done a deal with us. You've never done a deal with Bessemer. You've never done a deal with Rowe. They don't even know who you are. Here's the deal. I'll give you a $500,000 minimum fee. You take on the assignment, and I will give you the opportunity. I'll make every one of those funds agree to let you come pitch the partnership. Consider this, I'm paying you $500,000 to make a sales call." Pretty good deal, if you ask me, right? I said, "And since we never did business with you before, if you fail, you didn't lose anything." He said to me, "I'm going to do this for you because I really want to do business with you guys." I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll throw in a sweetener. You sell it for more than $30 million. We had $30 million of paid in capital. You sell it for more than $30 million, I'll give you 5% of the upside." Okay? This is a Thursday. On Saturday, we released Draw Something. Anybody remember Draw Something? Anybody? Nobody? Yeah, okay.
Right.
So on Saturday, we released Draw Something.
And it went.
On Saturday, we had 1 million new customers. On Sunday, we had 2 million new customers. On Monday, we had 3 million new customers. We were adding 1 million people a day, and we were generating $1 million a day in profit. Starting Saturday, selling this. And this guy got this deal. Well, the following week, so all of a sudden, the following week is the GDC conference, and we're going out of business. We can't even find a banker that will do us a favor. We go to this conference. We're going to go to the conference. I have dinner. The long and the short is Mark Pincus, who was the CEO of Zynga's in New York. He calls me up on a Saturday, and he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm looking at art." And, I threw out the hook through somebody else. He said, "Come have a drink with me." I said, "I'm not in California." He says, "I'm in New York." He said, "Come down and have a drink." I said, "I'm busy." He says, "Jordy, you know I am calling. Come have a drink with me." I made a deal with him on the spot, and we sold the business for $209 million. We closed. Now it goes back to when a VC wants to do a deal with somebody's a motivated buyer. From that Saturday to close, 16 days. A public company buying a private for $209 million. It can be done. But there's one where that was the lottery. Because from going out of business, we hit it was like one of the great outcomes of all time. I mean, for me, it was a 17x.
For you guys.
For me, 17x, yeah. It was great. And I was about to write it up.
What would be the top 2, 3 skills what you're looking to a person, CEO, inventors, general, like who lead the startups? And one more question, if you don't mind, like how do you identify, how do you catch when things start to go wrong? Like if there's any significant point in a company, the startup company.
I will say that I have a credo, which says no VC ever fired the CEO too soon. I want you to think about that. No, we never fired the CEO too soon, ever. We always waited too long. That's Texas. But the first question, so.
Sorry, can I dissect that a little?
Yeah, sure.
Is that because you're a nice guy and you waited too long, or is it because it's always a good idea to fire the CEO?
It's almost always a good idea to fire the CEO at some point. No, it's because we don't move fast enough, because we do. When you're the founder, CEO, we sort of try to create more leeway. It's just you get more. You know, you've lived with these people, you've lived with this lady, you've lived with this guy. You know, you've been together for the last 3-4 years. This person's, you know, there at 7 in the morning and there till 11 at night every day. They're pouring their heart and soul into this thing, but it's not working, and you just want to try to help them get it to work before. But you know every time. Sometimes you don't have consensus. I have a company. I'm sorry, we're all over the place.
That's good.
Synacor. Anybody know Synacor? So I'm the chairman of Synacor. It's a public company in the U.S. I went, and I'm the chairman of the company, and on January at CES of 2013, I said to the CEO, I think we're at an inflection point. And this is a company, it's a $125 million business, public. I said, you know, I think we're at a point I really think you should think about becoming the chairman. I'll step off. You should become executive chairman. We need to hire a great CEO to take us to the next level. I said, you know, you did a great job getting us from 0 to $120 million in revenue, public company, you know, all that stuff. I said, but, you know, it's just, and I was like, you know, he lives in California, he's been commuting, you know, you can be home more, you don't have the day-to-day responsibility. I mean, I made put this whole picture out there for him, you know, and I said, you know, and I'll keep your salary where it is. I'll get the board to do that, you know, and, you know, you can keep your salary even though you're the chairman. I'll work that out, you know, the whole bit. And the reason I said that, and I said that because I didn't have board support to let him go. So they said, well, you know, no, we're not ready to let him go. You're wrong. It's too soon, blah, blah, blah. I said, so I decided to try to talk him into it. He didn't listen to me. On January of the following year, 2014, I met him at CES, and I said, you had your chance. You're now being replaced. And every member of the board said we should have listened to you a year ago. And you know why? We're a public company, so the street is expecting our numbers to revenue to be about 105 million from 125. We had a year ago 40 million in cash. We finished the year. The street's projecting us at about 21 million in cash. So, you know, we waited too long. Perfect example. It happens too often. It happens all the time. And we just didn't have consensus. Sometimes that's the case. Now, to your question, you got to repeat it.
What are the skills?
Oh. Well, decisiveness. If you ask, by the way, Fred Wilson why he needed to replace Jack Dorsey at Twitter, it wasn't because Jack wasn't brilliant, because he is. He didn't make a decision. He just couldn't make definitive decisions. He was procrastinating, and now you're got to move fast. When you're a startup, you know, one thing, General Motors or, you know, Rogers Communication can take their time. You know, they can move slowly. They're a big company with huge cash cow. You're a startup, you got to move fast. So we're looking for people that are decisive, intellect, very important. It doesn't mean that there's a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of engineers here. Doesn't mean you have to be a PhD rocket scientist. It means you just have to be smart. Street smart, sometimes more important than the book smarts. But the bottom line is you've got to be smart. You have to know how to look at the crowd and figure out what's going on, how to know that you got to make a change to what you're doing, how you know you got to make that pivot now. You've got to go and let somebody go. You got to go and get on an airplane and go and make that sale yourself. Those are the things that you look for. Very decisive, very smart, and you really, you know, that's why it's interesting. A lot of CEOs were athletes. They were competitive, right? They had to compete. So those are characteristics that I think are very important. You know, if you're going to be a leader, obviously leaders, you know, there's a lot of, you know, you get, you know, the guys like, well, Mark Zuckerberg is a perfect example of an exception to the rule because he really does look down. You know, he does, and he's got the hoodie, and he does the whole thing. But generally, you want, you know, it's very hard to go and back somebody that's in that kind of position. You know, you really want somebody that has that charisma, that people will follow. I mean, ultimately, the CEO is the leader. People have to follow you. You know, I've been the CEO of a handful of companies, and I know what it is. And they got to believe that what you're telling them, you know, you're taking them, when Moses got to the Red Sea, seriously, he got to the Red Sea, and he said, trust me. And they're saying, we can't go there. We're going to get killed. The Egyptians are going to annihilate us. Now, trust me. And they followed him. And he put down that cane, and it opened up, the sea parted, and he went through it. Well, think about that story. Whether it's true or not it depends on whether you believe in religious theology. But the fact is, just the idea of it. Those people, the Jews, followed him to that river, knowing that if it didn't open up, they're dead. They were wiped out. And that's the whole point of a leader. That comes back to the things that, obviously, let's not get to that point. But the fact is, I'm quitting my job to come to work for you. Or I just got out of college and I have the opportunity, Microsoft or you. I'm going to follow you. I gotta believe that you can lead me. And if you don't create that impression, how can I do that? And I'm not going to get the best and the brightest. And ultimately, human capital is everything. I don't care how good your technology is. I'll show you in my career great technology that you've never heard of the companies if they didn't execute. You do need, obviously, good products in the end. But if you don't have everything else, the good products don't solve the problem.
All right, it's 8 o'clock. So
yeah,
I want to take us back to where you started a little bit in terms of, you put the question to everybody about what's wrong with VC in Toronto. Talk a little bit about why New York has taken off so strongly. Talk a little bit about, why you think what you're part of doing in Buffalo is going to work or is working, right? And then you answer the question: what's wrong with Toronto?
Well, New York is really a great success story. I mean, in this '90s, you had Silicon Alley, and it really made sense that you had all these digital media companies, right? So that's what really kicked off New York. And then it died, and I'm telling you, it was a death zone. We were struggling very badly in New York. And what happened, though, is you had, by the way, New York is 1/20th of Silicon Valley. And that might be even generous. For every company I'm looking at, there's 20 in Silicon Valley. I mean, Silicon Valley is an animal unto itself.
But it has surpassed Boston.
Oh, Boston is not
in this
even.
period.
Boston's life sciences. Boston's out. They're gone. They don't even exist anymore. They really don't. I mean, they're like Toronto, frankly, although they got a lot of VCs. They're like Toronto.
That's a good video.
You're regulated. But Boston is not a factor in the internet media world. I mean, they're out there. There's some stuff. There's some companies, but they're not a factor. It's New York. It's Silicon Valley. It's Silicon Valley. It's Silicon Valley. Then it's New York, and then after that, it's probably Los Angeles is becoming important again, and a little bit. Everybody talks about Austin. And Austin's nice, but it's not even in the same game. My guess is Boston's still bigger than Austin. The places you look at is why Chicago has nothing. I mean, this is the third largest city. There's nothing there, right? There's a little everywhere, right? There's pockets. And I spend the winters, I spend time in Miami, and they think they got a tech sector there. That's they got heat stroke is what they have. But
that's another good video clip.
But honestly, New York got a lot. We had an infrastructure from Silicon Alley that went away, but you had a bunch of people there. And what you really have in Silicon Alley, which you have in New York, which is what created New York, and I don't know if it's much different even in Toronto. Torontonians. 50% of every kid graduating from a good university in the United States wants to go to New York when they graduate. They want to go to New York. 50%. Even from the West Coast. They don't want to stay, but they want to go for a few years. Everybody, both my kids, they live in New York. They went to New York when they finished school. I mean, it's unbelievable. I say this demographically. You go, I don't know if you know New York, but you go south of 34th Street, you go south of Madison Park, I think the average age of a New Yorker today is about 27, 28 years old. It's all young people, and it's not young people that went to Erie Community College, which is a very nice place, 2-year community college. It's young people that went to Stanford and Harvard and Amherst and Wesleyan and Williams and Colby and University of Chicago and Northwestern and even Michigan's and Ohio State's and, you name it. And then here, University of Toronto. My friend Dennis Benny, big entrepreneur in Toronto, his daughters went there for a while. They wanted to be in New York. Everybody wants to be in New York. So now you got all this unbelievable intellectual capital, huge amounts of talent. So, you got to fill those jobs. Now we can't fill the jobs because the companies have outgrown it. But it was that, in my opinion, that had a huge impact on it because you had all this amazing talent.
We got that.
You have a lot of talent here. I got you. I grant you that. Buffalo. Let's talk about Buffalo. So we all know the stories of Buffalo. So let's not talk about the past. The truth of the matter is, you had a governor who drew the stake in the ground, and he basically said, "I'm not going to let Buffalo die. Before I'm going to give it one more shot of a special, experimental drug before the patient is terminated." And he gave $1 billion to Buffalo. And around that same time, there was this confluence of activities from previous politicians. It was government-driven, by the way. And you started to build a medical corridor like Cleveland has. And all of the medical industry started being in a campus. Not intentionally a campus, it just sort of worked that way. So now what you now have is, there's now 17,000 people working in our medical campus. And they were all here before, by the way. They just worked at the hospitals and university and all this other stuff all over the diaspora of Western New York. They're now all centered in one place. They got to live someplace. It starts to create the housing that you guys have. But, it's starting to change the culture. People want to live downtown again in restaurants, and all of a sudden it's a little cooler. Then the next thing, it gives it $1 billion. The $1 billion starts to bring some businesses. And so then you have some people like myself and some others that decided, well, they're not going to let this happen anymore. And we get these couple companies get sold, Cinecorp goes public, Campus Labs gets sold, Liaison gets sold. So there's some momentum. You can actually be in Buffalo and you can actually have a success. And then we decided, I decided to build an incubator, and solely for the purpose of trying to change, keep people here. And the incubator resonated. It's called C80 Labs, and we got some money with $5 million. We got some money from the state. We put some of our own money in, and we give every company on a match. We give them money, so we give $100,000 here, $200,000 there. Come live in the incubator. It's free. You got a place to work. You got mentors. Again, guys like Fred Wilson.
What are the terms of the $300,000?
Well, it's if we give you actual cash, then we negotiate a term sheet. So
So
it's
it's
never.
fixed? It's not a convertible?
No. I'm not into the. I'm not a debt person. I'm solely simple, straight, little, easy. I'm just a little schlepper sales guy from Buffalo. I want it simple. I just want stock. Just give me my stock. I
So
don't
what's
care
the
what else.
typical take? I mean,
It's never tough terms. We're not tough on the terms.
so is
We
it,
give you, it depends on where you are, but typically we give you $200,000 as a $2 million valuation or something for a company that's got one person or two people. I mean, we're not tough on the terms because we're doing this for community.
right?
We'd love to get it. What we want is, I can't fund this forever. I'm not going to. I'm stupid, but I'm not dumb. So, at some point I want something to return so that funds, and we basically took all the things that we get, anything that comes back actually stays there and it funds it for perpetuity. That's what we did. That's what we
Okay.
wanted to do for the community. So we started this thing, and then that started to work. And now we have like 60, 70 people there, a bunch of companies, but some companies sometimes didn't like our terms, which is okay. And they went and found other people, which is great. And then the Buffalo Angels got started because we were doing this stuff, and they said, well, we can feed off you guys, and you do the. So now we have Buffalo Angels, and they got a couple $1 million to go and do deals. And so it starts to feed off each other. And then the governor does this thing, and he says, well, what should we do? I said, well, they come up, McKinsey has this idea, let's do a business plan competition. What do you think, Jordy? Because I'm sort of the tech guy that they came to. And they could have gone to a lot of people, they just happened to go to the loudmouth guy. So they came to me and they said, what do you think? I said, well, if we're going to do business plan competition, it can't be like anything that's ever done. Nobody's going to care about Buffalo if we do a business plan competition like everybody else. What do you mean? I said, I need $5 million. We need to put in $5 million, and we need a first prize of $1 million. Never been done in the history of North America, anyways. They said, governor said, okay, you got it, but you got to share it. I said, okay, great. So they gave me $6.5 million, $1.5 million to run it, $5 million to give away, and it's the biggest business plan competition ever held in North America. And so now what happens? We go out and we hire a social media agency, the best in the country, in my opinion, VaynerMedia, Gary Vaynerchuk, if anybody knows who he is. Gary V, good friend. I said, Gary, you got to do this for me. He said, okay. He did it. Spent less than $200,000, 20 million uniques. We had ended up having 7,000 applications from 97 countries around the world, all but 2 provinces in Canada and all 50 states. They applied to win the money, knowing that if they win, they have to come to Buffalo to move here if they win the money. So 7,000 companies from 97 countries said, okay, I'll apply. If I win, I move. What does that say to the world? It says that we're open for business and maybe people will come here. If the money's there, they'll come. If the money was here, they'd stay. So we went through this process, and on October 30th, we're going to give away $5 million. Add that to the medical campus, add that to some exits, add that to the incubators, add that to the other stuff that's going on, and I get a phone call, honestly, from Chief of Staff to the Governor of the state of Delaware. That's the state that DuPont's on. And they want to know if I would come to speak as a keynoter at a event. They have the whole tech community of Delaware together to talk about the success of what we've done in Buffalo. Now, it's more smoke than anything else at this point, but we've planted the seeds. We've changed people's attitudes a little bit. We had a lot of Canadian interest from the stuff we did. They were thinking about, the only thing they thought about Buffalo was going there for the bars or going to see a Bills or a Sabres game, because, you guys don't need to come to Western New York anymore. But a little different thinking about it. We had a lot of Canadian applicants. And it was great because it's changing the perception. Not a huge leaps, it's not, but little bits at a time, and that's how you win. You just have to persevere and decide you're going to do it. So that's sort of what's happened there, and we're pretty excited about it, to be honest with you. I mean, people have a different attitude about Buffalo, and certainly Buffalonians have a different attitude about Buffalo than they've had in a long time. We actually have cranes. I mean, you've had cranes forever, but we actually have cranes. It's a crane count. They do a crane count.
That's good. So, finish where you started. What's wrong with VC in Toronto? What's wrong with VC in this country? By the way, the angel class is a bigger asset class in this country than venture capital. So, I think angels are kind of carrying their weight now. I mean, it would be great if the whole thing was 3 times bigger.
Right.
And we're in a context where federal government is kicking out $400 million to try to reboot venture capital in this country. In a context where in the United States, $17 billion went into VC this year, right? And we have no new funds. We've got basically maybe five or seven people writing checks in this town.
Yeah.
So, what's your opinion?
Well, I think that, unfortunately, I don't think you have leadership. I mean, I don't say that disrespecting anybody here. I don't think you have leadership that has the kind of stature, status, capability to go out and get the venture community to come take a look. Honestly, I looked at 6 or 7 companies today. There's not one of them that I won't consider having our guys take a deeper look. Why didn't I know before? Honestly. So there's no one there's not.
Can I interject for a second? Could you all please tell your politician about that? This is startup grind. You're paying for this event, and they're dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into public servants. And this guy is here telling you this. Why? Go ahead. Sorry.
So, no, it's okay. So, I mean, I just think that, unfortunately, there isn't some leadership. Nobody's taken, maybe the guys that are here want to keep it to themselves. I don't know. I don't think that's the case. But no one's really jumped forward and gone out and said to, gone up and said to Mark Andreessen and said to John Doerr and said to Vinod Khosla and said to Fred Wilson and said to Santo Peyote. I mean, I go through the list and say, you got to come and see what's going on here. You got to be part of this thing. Come on up here. Come on. Come. And that hasn't happened. So they haven't found their way on their own, except for the occasional cherry pick deal, right? Once every very while. I don't know how they find it. There's some analyst, does telemarketing and finds a company, and they show up and something happens. But they're just and then there isn't. I don't think there's unfortunately, there's not a community. You guys are the ecosystem of that community. There isn't a community when you think about the size of Toronto. This is the community. It's not a big enough community to get that momentum that I think it requires. And then the other thing is you got to have a couple of linchpin successes, and Hootsuite Out west, you had the company that created the game that Zynga's big game was a Canadian company. They were from, Calgary or Saskatchewan or something like that. I'm trying to remember who that was. I know the name, it's just escaping me. So there's been some pop, not in Toronto, right? I mean, we don't have those, the giant success that is sort of put it on the map to say, shit, we better go see what's going on. And then the spin-off that happens from that.
Desire to learn? Did anybody show you that deal?
Excuse me?
Desire to learn?
I do have one.
No, it's a company. Yeah, no. Okay.
So
I mean, it's a big deal.
So
here.
what's interesting, I'm sure, but and I'm not saying there aren't, by the way, but I'm just saying it hasn't created, and it's not because you're in Canada. Just understand something. To most of us, Canada is like Toronto is just another city in the United States. I mean, seriously, there's no chasm. There's no negativity to being in Vancouver or Toronto. Maybe anywhere else they look at them and say, like the Flin Flon Bombers kind of thing, right? But seriously, no, Toronto is like, you talk to most America, I mean, it's the most important film center in North America. I mean, that film festival is bigger than anything in the United States, and they come and flock here. There's no issues. There's nothing. It's just, so don't think that there's a stigma. Canada looks like they're the 51st state as to what most Americans think of. Seriously. I know, but I'm just saying that, there's nothing that stops you from getting on a plane and coming here. The thing that you worry about regulations either. Maybe you'll find there's some regulation later, but you don't even think that's an issue when you start off and go look at a deal. You find a deal, you're going. You find a couple deals and you're going strong. And, I will tell you, Pittsburgh is an example. Pittsburgh has done a really good job. They have this triangle venture forums that they put on, and they create and they market the Jesus out of it. And then how they get me to go? I don't really want to go. I mean, but they get me to go. They invite me to go play golf at Oakmont. Okay, Oakmont is like one of the number 4 in the golf digest top 100. I'm a golfer, so a bunch of us go because we go play golf. Whatever it takes to get you here, right? But they have this thing and the Three Rivers Venture thing, and they get everybody to show up, and all of a sudden people are looking and investing. There's good stuff because you got Carnegie Mellon there, right? Carnegie Mellon is the the great tech. You got everything I've just said exists and then some in Toronto.
We paid $130 million to get Richard Florida out of Pittsburgh rather than put $130 million into startups. Yeah.
But you have everything here. This is there's no American, and I say this to you honestly. There's no American that doesn't think that Toronto is one of the great cities of the world. It really is. Everyone knows it. It's cosmopolitan. It's got amazing ethnic culture. It's got every kind of culture. It's got everything you could think of.
It's got a mayor with character.
Huh? It's got what?
Mayor with character.
Yeah. And by the way, there's not an American that I know that doesn't know who the mayor of Toronto is. I mean, and that's a joke, but it's okay. Sometimes you take advantage of the joke. It's like, we sit there now and say, you want to talk about our weather? Okay. So what do you think Kara Swisher, who owns Recode, she named us Silicon Snowbank. And I thought it worked, and it's great, and we're using it. Because what the fuck? What are you going to do? It is what it is. It snows, right? So what are we going to do? I'm going to deny it? No, I'm not going to deny it. I might as well take advantage of it. If you don't like snow, don't come. But if you don't mind snow, it could be a great place to be. You guys got to take advantage of this. It's a phenomenal city with amazing talent and huge resources, not natural resources. Huge resources. Take advantage. You talk to athletes. I had a discussion one day. It's interesting. I had a discussion with Derek Jeter, just by coincidence, and I ran into him in Toronto. And I met him a couple times. He doesn't know me. But I met him a couple times. So I see him in New York, and we're talking. And I said, I met you in New York. He says, I love it. There's no city, it's my favorite city to go visit. I love walking around downtown Toronto. Derek Jeter. I mean, tonight's his last night playing for the Yankees, right? If they didn't get rained out. But, I mean, that's the way people look at it. So you guys got to do something about it.
Right.
And you got to do something because it's too big of an opportunity to waste.
We've done 27 of these, I think. I think this has been the best. Certainly got my blood boiling. He certainly,
This is hot.
you know, this is good.
The landlord turns the air conditioning off after 6, right? There's our host over there.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my
Really,
pleasure.
really
Thanks
appreciate
for
it. I love to take charge.